This is the assessment that is currently published online. And there was a taxonomic change, right? Is that the status of this one?
Yes. Now it is Tropus medius. Earlier it was Tropus giganteus.
Yeah. So the spirit of the red list is there's a lot of good information that is currently published, but a lot of things are not necessarily at the level that they should be or could be. There have been changing standards within the red list on making sure that these assessments meet the basics. And as I've worked with people, I've learned how to help enhance them. And as you know, as probably users of the red list, you often get in there and you find them lacking. There may be a lot of good information, but you also see issues. And so as we go forward, my intent is to ensure that we bring in new ideas, and you guys, and help everyone understand the process, but also the approach to the assessments, okay? And so that's where I like to start with, is to look at these assessments, understand what's good about them, understand maybe some of the deficiencies in what was written, but also then bring in new information, new perspectives, new data. Okay? So if you could scroll down to kind of the different parts, and we'll just briefly go through them. Okay. The taxonomy is something that you're obviously going to need to update because of some new taxonomy in here. Looks like, what are we going back? Tropus medius?
Yes, now it is Tropus medius.
Yeah, so we're going to go, looks like back in time here to the Timonec 1825 name. But this is an area where you just update this. This should be relatively straightforward for those of you that are more of the taxonomy into the crowd. But scroll down, please. The justification, this is a really important one. And, what I encourage people to do is, once you have the training, or even if you don't do the training, look at that one-page summary document on the criteria. Have it in mind, but don't write this section. Do not write the justification section until the end, but have the criteria in mind as you're doing the rest of it, because you will have a feeling based on your personal experiences with the species, with what you're reading, on what this assessment should be, or perhaps could be. So it's okay to have an opinion, but you want to keep an open mind so that you have it driven by the data, by the knowledge, by the literature that's out there, by your personal research and expert opinion, okay? Scroll down, please. Geographic range. This, again, is very straightforward in many ways. Without looking at this, my gestalt feeling on this particular description is it's a little detailed. Do you want to get in and describe every single, state within an area or every single island that a species is found on? You want this range description to convey the vision of what the broad species range is. And like it has here, you do want to have elevation explicitly stated within the range description. In the text part of it, it will also be in a drop-down menu. But you want this to capture the overall view. Not every single, I saw a bat in this place, I saw a bat in that community, etc. You want to talk broad patterns, especially for a species like this one that is so broad in its distribution. Yeah, keep on going. Scroll back up. Do we have that reference to China? That's one that is really uncertain. It's a disjunct record. if we can, in this assessment, can we bring clarity to it? Does it belong with this species? Could we get it addressed as it's either in or it's out? If it is thought to be a real record, then we would include it. But having this uncertainty year after year after year, it just means that we're really not working to address it. And I don't know if there is a way to address it, but if we could, that would be great. Scroll on down, please. Again, the mapping, you guys can update this based on those distributions. The more detailed, the better. And just keep on scrolling. So here's a great one. So there's certain things that we want to have within the text on the population, okay? And you will know this much better than I because this isn't a species that I work with. But you want to have a few statements that are in the text. One, do we have a sense of the global population? Then the answer is probably no. So if we don't know the global population, have a statement with that. Hey, we don't know the global population. Is there a positive, negative, or is it stable? What are the trends? Is it stable, etc.? Explicitly state that as well and why you think that. So we think we have no global population numbers, but we think it's decreasing because of deforestation, because of hunting, because of whatever it happens to be. Now, the other thing that you may put in here is if you have ideas of colonies, you know, if there are large colonies, you may talk about trends within, you know, all colonies within India, I'm making this up, all colonies within India have disappeared. You know, that would lend credence to the thought that, hey, it's disappearing or it's decreasing. Okay? But you don't have to get into, again, every single detail, and please avoid equating colonies or how often it's captured to populations. You can say, hey, it's rarely captured or whatever, but that doesn't mean it's a population. Does that make sense? Everyone doing okay? Habitat ecology, great section. This is often where we see a lot of wonderful information. Don't forget to say, hey, it's a fruit bat, it's a flying fox, it's an insectivorous bat. You know, I read many assessments and, you know, we know what the bat is, but people reading the red list assessment may not know that it's an insectivorous bat, for example. So don't forget to talk about its feeding ecology, what types of habitats that it's found in, from the overstory type habitat, maybe it's a forest bat, maybe it's a cave bat, or what that are found in lowland tropical rainforest, etc. But find a way to synthesize the overall habitat in ecology, organize it in a logical manner. Right? Let's see. Yep. Why don't you keep on going down? Use and trade. This is great. You know, if it's hunted, if it's used for, you know, collected and traded for other purposes, you know, whatever it happens to be. And then threats. This will be the main threats. You don't have to mention every single little threat out there. You want the things that are going to be threatening at a population level. Deforestation, you know, hunting, you know, maybe there's disease, who knows what. But it's the emergent overarching threats to the region or to the species. Now, if there are within region threats, then you would want to put that context in there as well. So conservation section, it actually has two critical pieces of information. So I often advise people to have it as at least 2 paragraphs. One, you're going to talk about conservation. And one of the key things that the red list looks for is the bat found in a protected area. If it is, mention it. Say, hey, it's found throughout its range, it's found in protected areas, or it's only found in this protected area, or you may put in a few examples if it's found in multiple ones. But be very explicit about whether or not it's in a protected area. Are there any types of conservation efforts for it? You know, colonies are protected. You know, some colonies are protected in this country, but not in that country. The species would benefit from these types of conservation actions, habitat restoration, habitat protection, and so on. But things that are conservation related would go in the conservation section and its own paragraph. And then I like to separate it out so that it's not lost, a paragraph on the research. And this is where, you know, people like you, we often think, oh, I don't have this information. So is the taxonomy still a question? Is it, do we know population numbers? We already said we did. Do we know trends? Well, we are inferring trends, but we need to understand that. We need to know about its distribution. We need to know movement ecology. So highlight all of the research needs within that. Now, one of the other things that I didn't mention because it's consistent throughout all of these sections. You want the different sections to be consistent, not contradictory. So I've read many of assessments that describe it as an endangered species in the justification, but then in the population section, they'll say it's, you know, the most common species. Or they'll describe the species as increasing, and it contradicts their statement that it's an endangered species. Or they'll say it's a least concerned species, and that all the threats suggest it's highly endangered and populations are decreasing. So when you talk about these things, make sure that they're consistent among the different sections. If you say it's threatened by deforestation, well, you should make sure that in your habitat ecology section, it says it's a forest associated species. Again, these may seem like obvious things to you, but there are gaps that I have seen countless times in working with people on assessments, which is why I highlight. Okay. Any questions? Then we could kind of move to the other document.
And I think it's pretty clear. I just have one question. Maybe sure. it is something that you have already explained. So in the section range description, so we need to, because, you know, these flying foxes have like hundreds and not thousands of roosts across its region, right? Its geographic niche. So over here, we have only those roosting sites for which we have the references, but we know, like, we study a lot of other sites as well. So do we need to put those areas here?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear the last part.
So do we need to include those roosting sites of flying foxes where we do not find any reference, but we know by our personal experience?
Yeah, so it is.
Yeah, that's a similar question I had as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So when you're writing these assessments, you know, obviously peer-reviewed literature is great. Unpublished records, as long as they're good, is great. Books, etc., and expert opinion. You could, you know, if you have personal experiences, it's unpublished data. You can figure out how you want to articulate it within the assessment. Now, for what you were just talking about, like there's hundreds, if not thousands, of known roost sites. You know, there's no publication associated with that. Where would that type of information go? You know, it really depends. You know, my initial thought would be to put that in the habitat ecology section, and with some general statement along those lines, and you could reference, maybe there's some core publications, but also then unpublished data. And then you may also talk about, hey, it's been known to roost in colonies from, individuals to colonies of 100,000 bats. But that way you have it in the roosting ecology, and you can talk about it's found in a diversity of forest habitat types. Maybe I don't know the species at all. Maybe it's associated with certain forest types, certain trees, or whatever. But you could take that approach to it.
Now the question on top of it is, so these flying foxes migrate, seasonal migration. So in a certain year or in a certain month, we have flying foxes at one roost, but in certain months like winter, there is no bat or like very few, and they migrate. So we need to document like from where they are migrating to which place in this section, right? In the habitat and ecology.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And given that, it probably really confounds, the populations, the monitoring. And so, I could see a section within the habitat ecology, and perhaps there's a section, again, you would know the details here, but perhaps there's a section in the distribution that within the distribution, you may say, hey, it's seasonally present in this part of the country, but absent during migration. And then in the ecology, you may talk about that in greater detail. It roosts in colonies of, X bats in these parts, and then you go into the migration end of things. And my guess is there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of research questions associated with the movement ecology of these bats. Where do they go? Do they all pick up as a colony? Do they disperse? Do they congregate? There's probably a lot of research questions. And so one of the things that you can do is synthesize what you know, but set up the gaps, which then would go into the conservation section under research needs.
Yeah, and I just want to make a point here. Like I can talk about Pakistan, the range description. So it says Karachi, Pakistan, this flying foxes roosting is there. So, but from my experience and from my research, which is still unpublished, but I'm working on it, there is no roosting site in Karachi in Pakistan because of the climate change. So climate change has pushed this flying fox to the northern areas of Pakistan, which are cooler. So, and there is a lot of change in that. And I'm pretty sure this is happening in other countries in Indian subcontinent.
Yeah. And I think that would be, this comes back to maybe change. You could, under distribution, you could talk about changing distribution because of climate change. It may go into the habitat ecology piece, but it certainly goes in threats as climate change is changing the habitats, forcing changes in the migration patterns in their traditional roost sites. And then it also goes into the research
needs. Nice. Okay. So any other question from the audience? From the participants, sorry.
I have a question in the conservation section. So I was curious if like community level conservation actings could be brought in, because they are not published in manuscripts or in any wildlife protection programs, but there are community level conservation things happening for this species in particular, which is out in media, like news articles and media coverages. But can it be brought inside the conservation section?
Yeah, I think so. If I understood you correctly, you were breaking up a little bit on my end. If there's public media associated with it, you may want to bring that in.
Yes.
It's because public, educational awareness campaigns is a conservation strategy. And when we go to the Excel file on the classification sheets, you're going to see a whole bunch of different possible activities. And maybe this is a good transition point for us, because the habitat types, the threats, and the conservation research are all covered in that document, in that classification document, the Excel file. And what you can also do is to use that Excel file and those terms and concepts and use them to help frame what you write in the assessment. So Tusef, could you maybe change to the classification document, the Excel file?
Sure. Yes, sure.
Thank you. Did that get at your question?
Yes, mostly, yeah.
So why don't we go to the research conservation action, since that's what triggered this change, the third tab over.
Can you repeat, please?
So there's 3 tabs. You're on the threats tab. They're at the bottom. Yeah, so go to that one. Right. So here's how they've got it set up. And these are all of their categories. And, you know, again, I sometimes struggle with some of the red list categories, but I learn to just accept and use them as best I can. So when I'm thinking about a species like the Pteropus medius, you know, we're going to talk about, you know, the loss of critical roost sites as one of the threats. You know, the trees are cut, it's deforestation, it's development, you know, who knows what. But conservation actions, you know, site area and protection. You know that there are places that should be protected, right? So all you would do here is to put a little check box there. So site and area protection, resource and habitat protection. You know, from a red list perspective, they think of it as something separate. I often conflate the two. So you know that there are roosting areas. We know that there are foraging areas that may be of importance. We know that there's habitat that needs to be protected or resources. So I just put an X in each one of those boxes. Then management. Again, roost sites need to be managed. Are there any endangered or any invasive species that are being impacted here? Is there opportunities for restoration? You know, are protected areas designed for it? So, you know, you could just go through all of this stuff. And, you know, for what I was thinking about, you know, I would mark 1.1, 1.2, 2.1, and 2.3. I don't know about invasive species, plant or predator or disease that could be an issue for the species, but you guys would. It's a species that's hunted and eaten. Is that correct or no?
It's not eaten, but it's hunted as a pest.
Oh, hunted as a pest. So that's not really management. Well, maybe it goes there. Species management, harvest management, trade, limiting population growth. I'm not sure if it would hit there.
So limiting population growth, what does this mean? So people try to reduce their number so that they can, you know, this is what's happening, but as a pest control.
That may be the case. I'd have to look that one up. It's an unusual category for me. And so, you know, I think get into the red list documents and, you know, maybe try and find out what that exactly means. Mm-hmm. You could scroll on down. I always put in for the bats that I work with, section 4.3, awareness and communication. I think this is what someone was mentioning here as an important need. You know, if there are existing awareness communication programs, you can highlight them in the text. If it is a need, you could also highlight that as a need. Is formal education or training needed? you guys be the judge of that. Are there policies that may need to be used? Oh, this would be another area. Is the species covered under CITES? Is it covered by national wildlife laws? Or maybe its habitats protected by national laws. So you could talk about those things in the text, but also identify them here. Do we need new policies and laws, or do we need implementation of them, compliance? So, and then you can think about livelihood stuff. You know, maybe there's ecotourism opportunity. I don't know. But you select the things that are going to be logical, or the things that you know are in place for the species. Okay. Make sure that it's highlighted in what you write, and that this document here is all check boxes within the database system. And so not everyone sees that information. So having it written and the text boxes allow for querying the SIS database, the red list database. Does that make sense?
Yes. So the question is, so every category here, like 5.1.1 or whatever. So there is an information on the IUCN website regarding description of this thing, right?
Yeah, they have publications for most of this. Well, no, they have publications for all of this. I can send you the documents.
Yeah, that will be great. So, for example, we click the last option, we cross non-monetary values. So, and on top of this is a conservation action needed. So, what does this mean? I mean,
so that may be, again, these are things that I don't necessarily think about. So conservation action needed, non-monetary values, they would have a specific definition.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't really know what that means. You know, let's use like conservation payments. Oh, we need a program to pay for the species protection of the species roost. You know, I often think about these things in realistic terms. Sure, we can pay for the protection of all these individual species, and there's not enough money in the world to do that for, you know, even a small percentage of the species. So I think about what would make sense, you know, and you know, having some sort of livelihood initiative, you know, may make sense because it could catalyze the protection of the species or the habitat, because their livelihood is associated with having the habitat and the bats.
Yeah.
So,
and because we are on this Excel sheet, so why should not we go into the research action needed? So we need to cross those for which we think there should be research, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like, you know, without writing this, you can, on the research, you often know what's needed. You know, again, I don't know about the taxonomy, but population size, distribution, and trends. We need that information. Life history. I suspect we need more life history stuff.
Yes, yes.
We know that it's harvested or persecuted, so we need something along those lines. We need more research into the threats, especially something like, you know, the implications of climate change. Actions, I'm not sure what exactly they mean, but I think it's conservation actions, which ones are needed to affect conservation. I don't generally think of non-endangered species. So I often save the conservation planning for the endangered species or threatened species. But maybe this is an important species. So you may think about, you know, we need plans in place. Monitoring population trends. We know that they're persecuted, therefore harvest trends. Trade, they're not traded, and habitat trends. You know, so a lot of this is really logical because we need it for virtually everything.
Exactly. So is any other question from the participants?
I have a quick question about the range description. I mean the range map of the species. So whenever we go through couple of species, I see that there are two color type of range description. One is, I mean, extent description, I mean extent of the species, and another one is possibility of the extent of that species. I mean, there are two color coded range descriptions in the map.
Mm-hmm.
So in that species, the species assessed by Sushan Sang. So she described China as the with orange color coded, but she mentioned it in the range descriptions that the distribution in China is uncertain. So why not we color code China with purple? I mean the possibility of the range description instead of exactly the species is happening in China.
Yeah, exactly. I think I highlight one of the points that should have been caught. I should have caught it when we updated. I reviewed and updated this species. The map doesn't fit the text. So the map should, for China, have that purple color, I think, that says presence uncertain. So much of the red list, all of the red list, it's dependent upon volunteers. And in the past, we have let the management of it, the management of it has gotten larger and larger and larger. And then for the old world in particular, we have so many species, but we really want to engage people like yourselves versus we get a small group of people together and they do them all, which is what has happened in the past. So the challenges of getting small groups of people to do, like yourselves, do these species or multiple species is there's a lot of management and things. It's easy to lose track of some of these things. But it's with the diligence and the extra eyes and the extra minds that say, hey, that doesn't make sense. Let's correct that. So even though you have a fairly recent assessment, you should look at it and think, I'm going to make this my own, as in you guys. You're going to make it your own. You're going to correct deficiencies. If you feel like you want to use a significant part of what was already written, then we should maybe explore, would Susan be the co-author on it? But my point of view is that you guys should take it, look at it with a fresh mind, and write it anew. Totally rewrite it in your vision, your voice, and I will work with you to strengthen and resolve any of those deficiencies or gaps.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so we should move to the threats or habitats.
Yes, habitats is complex, but it's the next easiest. So there are a lot of habitat types here. So scroll up, you're all the way down at section 14.2.
Sorry.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of them.
Can you see?
There you go. So what I would encourage is, think about, this is where understanding the species ecology is really important. Is it a lowland species? Is it high mountain elevations? Is it forest? Is it agriculture? Is it, understanding the full breadth of the species distribution? And so, for example, I suspect that one habitat type that it would be associated with would be row 15, 1.6, subtropical and tropical moist lowland forests. Is that a fair assessment? It's found in forests at low elevations?
Yeah, subtropical, tropical. I mean, yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, and
Yes,
you
sir.
guys, yeah, you guys will, I was just picking that as one possible examples, but you guys will look across the species range. Again, don't write this as if it's a Pakistan assessment of the species or a Sri Lanka assessment of the species, a Bangladesh or an Indian perspective of the species. You want something that represents the range of the species. Okay, so make sure that you have an assessment that reflects the species, not an individual bias, a country bias, an individual person bias. And that's what's great about your team. You have diversity across the species range represented by the group on the call today. But again, whatever habitat type, figure out, is that their primary habitat type in that region? Is it suitable? Is it marginal? Or is it, you just don't know? There will be, for a species like this, something that you definitely know. This is its primary habitat type and it's of major importance. But it may also be found in other areas. Okay? You only have to put an X. You only have to do the ones where it fits. Everything else you leave blank on this stuff. So if it's, again, if 1.6 is it, maybe it's under, you would check box suitable and major importance, yes. The rest of it, you don't have to fill in. Okay. And then go through all the habitat types. There's a ton of habitat types. A lot of them are not applicable at all.
Yeah. I want to make a point here. It's slightly different point, but think about the biogeographic realms, like the 8 biogeographic realms. So Pakistan is like is having 2 biogeographic realms. One is a Palearctic and one is an Indo-Malayan, right? And I noticed that this species do not go into the Palearctic. I mean, I don't know what are the reasons. Like there are the trees, there are everything is there, but they do not have the roosting site on that area. And they always have in the Indo-Malayan region.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, is that a real distribution, or is that, has there been research along the border between the two? Do we have a...
Yeah, huh? There is no research, but this is something which I have surveyed, right, for my roosting sites, right? And I did not find any roosting site on that Palearctic region.
Yeah, and maybe there's roosting trees, but no food, or maybe the temperatures aren't right. Again, these are your questions that I think would be wonderful to include.
So only one habitat is selected here, but I think the savanna, right? We have the savanna as well. We have the subtropical. These are something, I mean, shared. Species are present in multiple habitats.
Yeah. Well, and you're going to have on habitat use, you may have different things, and this goes back to your habitat ecology section. So you're going to talk about the types of forests or the types of trees that it roosts in. Maybe it forages in a different habitat type. Maybe it migrates over different habitat types. I work with a bat here in the United States where during the summer, it roosts in trees. During the winter, it hibernates in caves and mines. And so you have a migratory species. Does the habitat type that it uses, at different portions of the year, does it change? So your descriptions in the text will highlight those important differences. This checkbox here is going to highlight all the different habitat types that it's found in.
Yeah, and we are hoping that the strobus is present in many habitats because Indian subcontinent has got a huge latitudinal gradient. So there is like a Himalayas on the north, and the elevation increases, so the different ecoregions and that type of things.
Right.
Okay, then we move to the threat, right? If any question from here.
Just a quick thing to ask. So like what Joseph said, like those anecdotal things, can we actually mention them, or do we need to find actual something to actually cite, or an expert's opinion or something like that? And if it's an expert's opinion, how can we actually like say it, like, you know?
Well, so that's a great question. If these are more anecdotal thoughts or observations, you know, it probably won't be represented in the habitat classification scheme. But if you think it's worthy of mention, you should find a way to represent it. Now, one of the things that I personally think about when working with people on these assessments, you know, we may be very comfortable with referencing expert opinion of someone like Tigger Kingston. But at this point in time, you guys are becoming the experts. You know, so if these are observations that you have, it's okay to highlight these as observations. But just like with that of an individual of any stature here, you know, if it's an important observation, include it. If it's, you know, a one-off, I saw a bat do this, is it really important for the assessment? If it leads to a major research question, then I would highlight, hey, this is an important behavior, anecdotally observed, but it may be very important to understand. Or, you know, that's not how you would frame it, but I would include it. And it's, you know, as the people that work with the bats that have those anecdotal observations, you would be the judge of, is that really an important thing to include, or is it just a cool factoid? And the other piece I would encourage you guys to think about as you're writing this, don't hesitate to write it as you want it. When I read it as an external, or when we get an external expert to review it, you know, we can talk about, oh, go into more detail in this section, or is there value in this anecdote? Should we keep it in, or maybe we should take it out? Again, the first assessments are always really, really tough because you're not certain how much to put in, how you want to write it. You're finding your voice. And I want to help you find your voice while avoiding all the mistakes that I personally have made over the years doing these things. But I want you to have your voice in writing this.
Right. Thanks.
Any more questions? Okay, so we move to the threats. Okay.
Now this one is where it gets difficult.
Yes, that is.
Which is why I saved it for the end. So, and many people do not use this correctly. Okay, so how about you guys mention one threat type? So what's a major threat to the species?
Habitat loss.
Habitat loss. So forest loss, deforestation.
Yeah, but it depends on the researcher. Like everyone has a different research background, so everyone has its own lens. So what I feel is that the extreme heat is something really important here.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at those two and where they would be represented in this tab. Okay, let's first focus on the habitat loss. Okay, so, and if you could scroll down a little, please. All right, right there. So deforestation, for whatever purpose, is going to come in under development. So, we have residential and commercial development that is happening that's causing deforestation. If that's the case, it'd be written in the text, and then you would also have it here. If the forests are going to be lost and they're being used for timber production, okay, then it would go where you have it highlighted here under wood and pulp plantations. But notice this is under agriculture and aquaculture as the broad category, so section 2. Now, if the forests are being lost because they're being converted to agricultural lands of any type, then they would go under that section 2.1 and the subcategories. If they're being converted to grazing land, they'd go under 2.3. Okay, so if you scroll down a little bit more, please. I think it's section 5. Yes, here we go. So a little more. Keep going, and there we go. Good. So this is where people often put habitat loss, deforestation, because look, logging and wood harvesting. It's right there again. But this is the section where you're focused on the species. Is the species being used? Is it being hunted or trapped? Yes, it is. Gathering of terrestrial plants. It's a bat. It's not being gathered as a terrestrial plant. It's a bat. It's not being logged or wood harvesting. So logging and wood
Those are meant for plant species. Okay.
Yes. Yes. So you don't put this in here. The only way that it should be possibly in here is maybe logging and wood harvesting, and it comes back to unintentional effects. But even then, that's a little bit of a stretch. The logging and the habitat loss as an issue, as a major issue, really belongs under the section 2 agriculture, and then depending on what purpose it goes there.
Okay. So 5.1 is relevant to us, right?
Yeah, I think 5.1 is. Intentional use species is the target. Now, you told me that it's persecuted. So why is 5.1.1 the marked versus 5.1.3? Both of them are marked. The persecution and control is what I heard you say. So what's the purpose, or what's the reasoning behind 5.1.1?
So 5.1.1 is they are used as a medicinal purpose. They are used for other purposes except the pest control or persecution.
Okay, so they are used for other purposes, just not being eaten.
Yeah, medicinal purposes or any other purposes. They are commonly used in Indian subcontinent.
Okay.
Bushmeat consumption is also anecdotally
Yeah,
present.
they do in certain
India.
parts of Sri Lanka as well. They are eaten.
Okay.
Like,
not in Pakistan, but that is the trend overall.
Yeah. So I think that given what you have here, intentional use as well as the persecution, both of those fit. And then in the text, under the use and trade, you would make sure that you mentioned these sorts of things. And then the threat, it would be included under threats. Could you scroll back up to the top so we can see what the different columns are?
Yes, please. I have a question in that as well.
Okay, so the timing, it's ongoing as a 3. Okay, scope, you can decide if it's covering, the majority or the entire range, more than 90%, majority, etc. And the severity. Now, if if there is, remember, this is about major threats. Okay? If the threat isn't major, perhaps we shouldn't be including it. So if there's severity that there is no decline, why are we really measuring it, mentioning it? Now, if there's a potential risk of a future decline, then that's a different story. Okay. The other piece to keep in mind here, ecosystem stresses.
Yes.
You can talk about those. From conversion to degradation, this is more the habitat loss. The persecution doesn't really come into play here, so I would leave it. So section 5.0 with the persecution and the hunting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how I would see that being influencing ecosystem stressors, so maybe that part stays blank, but the species stressors are definitely there. And so you would have the direct mortality, so 2.1. You would also have disturbance, because as they go into persecute, as they go into hunt at the colonies, you're disturbing the species. So I often think of 2.1 and 2.2 as an important component of those.
So we can add 2.1 and 2.2 within one column, right?
Yes.
If it's applicable. And then the confusion here is, so we have ecosystem stresses, ecosystem conversion, degradation, and indirect ecosystem effect. Can you please explain a little bit or elaborate more on how we can define them? I know a basic definition, but I really want you to explain.
Yeah, I think, well, a lot of this is the scale that we're talking about. So it's happening in minority parts of the species range. There's spots where the development is happening that's infringing on the bats, right? And causing or could cause fluctuations. Seems reasonable. You may also think about this as maybe slow, significant declines, depending on your understanding of the level of that threat. But the incremental development, housing expansions, is that going to convert the ecosystem? No. But what you have identified here, it's degrading the overall habitat quality. It's degrading the ecosystem, therefore it's impacting the species. Mm. And that degradation, it's obviously disturbing them. The other thing that you may ask yourself, is it also creating the mortality? Maybe, maybe not. Mm-hmm. So what you have here looks perfectly fine to me. It's consistent with how you guys have been talking about it. If you decide that, hey, you want to change some of this around, you guys be the judge of that. For this part here, so agro-industry plantations, let's look at this one. It's ongoing. It's happening over larger areas, larger landscapes, so a 2, across the majority of the species range. Now, if it's such a major issue, is 3 the right category for that? Should it be, oh, a 3 is a slow, so yeah. Sorry, this is very small on my end, so I'm reading it. So yes, slow, significant declines. That seems logical. Oh, thank you. My old eyes. Now you have it as ecosystem degradation. Okay, that would make sense. I would also ask you, the question is, because it's happening across the species range, it is causing problems. When you look in areas, are ecosystems being changed? We go from major forested areas, and now we have kilometers of agricultural lands, kilometers of plantations, kilometers of whatever. Perhaps this could also be ecosystem conversion in some of the species range.
So the question here is, for my understanding, so we can easily see, like, if we plant many trees, then ecosystems start changing, and we see like number of species come to inhabit that space. But the opposite is ecosystem conversion, like species are moving. That is very difficult to monitor. Maybe I don't really have understanding on that.
Yeah, well, can you go to a landscape and look across, and you see a landscape, and you can say, oh, this is an agricultural landscape. Oh, this is a forest landscape. This is an urban landscape, or whatever. And when you think about this from the bat perspective, is it changing in a manner that is converting it from one landscape type, one land use type, forest, to agriculture? And if you see and think of these landscapes as changing, then I think that's an ecosystem change. If it's just all these little changes, incremental changes, and the habitat quality is coming down, degrading, then that 1.2 is legitimate. And again, you guys are the judge of this, because I've never traveled in that part of the world. You have the eyes on the ground for what is happening.
And indirect species effect. So most of that are inapplicable, I think, from my understanding. But then there is a category which is 8 other. So for example, there is a threat pollution and river pollution, stream pollution, and there are categories, and I will show you that as well. So if the bats are impacted by the pollution, they are multiple ways to get affected by that pollution. So this is the other category which I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, let's go down to
where it is. I don't remember.
I think it's on down.
Yes, here we have the pollution 9.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep. So always think about this as, how is it impacting the species and or its habitat? So agriculture and forestry effluents. So it's releasing the herbicides and pesticides. It gets into the food, and therefore it gets into the bats. Or maybe the habitat's changing because of these as well. So when you think about this, I would suspect on your 9.3.3, because of what you described above, it's happening over landscape conversion, plantations over a majority of the species range. Often these large plantations are heavily have heavy use of herbicides and pesticides. So as a threat, it seems to me that would read as a 3 for column D. It's happening over the majority of the range, could be 2. And our understanding of the implications of the pollution on the bats is a little bit not as tight. So maybe that becomes what was it, category 4 of possible causing fluctuations, or could cause, or I can't remember the categories. Yeah, could cause problems. So I could see that as one way to complete that section.
Yeah, and I have highlighted in yellow some of the areas which I think maybe have some impact, but I really don't know. Like like how the large dams can impact flying foxes. I really don't know, but what I know is mostly these flying foxes colonies are near the water bodies, and if there is a dam or if there is expansion of land, then the trees get submerged and that type of things. And then you talk about herbicides and pesticides, and that is making some understanding. What you are talking about here is like they get pesticide or herbicide by eating the fruits that were sprinkled with these herbicides, or that is the herbicides that are draining into the water.
Well, and I was just making those examples up. Again, if this is a threat, you guys would decide how it's impacting.
Mm-hmm. And if we think that there is a threat, but we do not know any information, like, then what should we do?
Well, you would highlight that as, you know, maybe under the text, you know, this is an emergent threat, and therefore highlight it as a threat in the threat category, and then illuminate it in the research needs.
Okay. That is nice. Okay. And so as we were talking about the climate change, and there is an extreme temperature, and I think that is the one which fits, but there is a thermal pollution. What is the difference?
Scroll to the left. I need to see the broader categories first.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. What is section 9.6?
Is that excess energy?
All right, I'm sorry, 9. That's pollution. Huh. I don't think thermal pollution is referring to climate change temperature. I think thermal pollution is talking about, you know, maybe development like power plants that are releasing energy and therefore warming water temperatures or other habitats. So I think it's something to do with that.
Something to do with buildings, maybe, like
yes,
due to
yeah.
heat island.
Yeah, but I think the climate change one would go down under climate change.
Yeah.
Exactly. So because as Emily says, like the extreme temperature also heat up the concretes, right? The cities areas, and they release the heat in maybe after sunset. So that is a problem. So that goes into thermal pollution.
Oh, that's a great, there's a great example. So it is related to climate change, but it is a thermal pollution. So that's a possibility. I think, you know, maybe look at the specific guidance. I've never used this one.
Especially since a lot of flying fox colonies are coming into urbanized areas, it might become a threat, maybe.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about would be nice to see highlighted in the threats section as a direct result, these bats come in here and mention the thermal pollution and explain what it is. You know, you don't have to write, you know, and you don't want to write a paragraph on it, but enough to understand why thermal pollution is being mentioned.
And if I'm sorry, go ahead, please. Okay. Okay, so these all threats goes into a category threat on the main document. There is a category threat, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Himali, you have a question, I think.
Oh, no. I just said, yeah. I had a question about one of the columns on scope. Just wanted to clarify. So by scope, where you mean the entire global or regional population, right?
Yeah, scroll to the top, please. Yeah, so under scope, this is all about from the species perspective.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, and again, we won't know specifically I often think about it in a broad brush category. Now, again, if you're on a tiny island and then it's found in mainland Southern Asia,
Yeah.
you know, obviously it's a minor part of the species range.
Right.
But use those as general guides, you know.
Yeah, and this minority, it's 50%, but it actually means less than 50%, right? It just says 50%.
Yeah.
And to me, it appears that you are here in scope. We are talking about the number of species, like over 90% number of members of that species are impacted, but actually it is the area.
It is area. It's the geographic scope.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if your species is, you know, this species has a broad range, but if there's the majority of the population that is with global population is within a much smaller restricted area, then that's part of what you would describe in the distribution section as well as in the ecology section when you talk about movements and the ecology.
Perfect. Any more questions?
Right. Is that helping?
It really helped. Any more questions?
So is everyone on this on the team here? Is everyone doing the Red List training?
I already completed that.
I'm very close to it.
Yeah.
Maybe within this week.
I'm on 3 as well. Yeah.
That final test is a little tough.
Yes, it's really tough.
Yeah. Most people I know take it 2 or 3 times.
Oh, wow.
Maybe multiple times.
Yeah, but take your notes, have them out. They encourage you to have access to all of this. So, I encourage everyone to, rather than spreading the training out over a longer period of time, try and do it in a shorter period of time so it's fresh in your mind, and then have all your notes ready. But that module 8, the test, is a little bit challenging. Once you get through the training and you get a first assessment done, everything starts to flow a lot easier. And the other piece I really encourage you guys to think about is, and not get tied up in needing to do it perfect. I've written assessments that I look at now and I say, oh, I should have done something different. Okay. My job for Old World Bats is to help you guys succeed. And I will look at these with a fresh set of eyes. I get to ask the naive questions because I don't know everything about all the species. I deal with 900 to 1,000 species of bats. My knowledge is like this much on most of them. But I can ask those leading questions. I've worked with people where their first drafts, the species were least concern. I read the information and I asked questions, and the species becomes endangered. They didn't want to write it as endangered because it was least concern before, but the information was there. And we've gone the other direction as well. So I encourage all of you to think about this with a fresh set of eyes, fresh minds, fresh perspectives, look at the historic literature, bring in the new information, follow the criteria, and even if it's not quite right, if you will, that's my job, is to help you guys in this process.
That is great. Okay, so I have a last question, I think. So when we go through the exam, and there are 9 categories, right? The red list category. So whatever the information we are entering on these data sheets, I think like how they translate into those 9 categories, because in those 9 categories talk about the number of the species, like, and the geographic area extent, that type of thing. But I didn't find any like similarity, or what can I say, like there is some missing link, I think. How this information convert into those categories?
Yeah, why don't I'm going to pull up the one-page summary. Okay, just give me a second, and you may need to give me permission to share my screen.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Yeah. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. There we go. All right. So now you should be able to see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is that one-page summary document. It's available on the website. I can also send it to you. We may also go to the website so I can show you where all these documents are. But there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 basic categories for the assessment criteria. Okay. Now, as you get familiar with this process, you will automatically jump to certain parts. You'll know what works, what doesn't work. But what I also encourage you to do is, again, keep an open mind. Don't have a predetermined decision in your head. Okay? This first category here, category or criterion A, this is all about population declines. And as researchers, you're probably very uncomfortable with thinking about a population decline when you don't know numbers. You know, you don't have an overall species population, and you don't know how many have been lost, but you do know that things have been lost. And so you're going to want to think about this from, you know, can you piece together in a robust and defensible manner that, hey, 90% of the colonies have been lost, you know, throughout the species range. I made up the number, obviously. But you may have forest loss as a surrogate variable. You can look at forest loss and correlate it to population declines. Again, that may or may not be applicable. But criterion A, with all of its subcategories, is all about percent decline in the global population, specifically to reproductive adults, mature adults. And it's over a 3 years or not 3 years, 10 years or 3 generations. In the case of our bats, it's going to be 3 generations that you're going to have to deal with. So criterion A may be applicable for your species. Criterion B will not be applicable for your species, given what we know about the species range. It's huge. This is about the species range. So the extent of occurrence or its area of occupancy. You know, you have hundreds, if not thousands of roosts. It covers many, you know, vast areas. So its geographic range won't be applicable at all. Small populations, again, well beyond anything that we're talking about for this particular species. Very small or very restricted population, again, not applicable. And we don't have quantitative data to get at this. So for your species that we're talking about now, the only criterion that could apply is going to be criterion A. Now, you can say and look at this is under criterion A, 2, 3, or 4, have we seen a loss of 30% of the species in the past and or projected to the future? Are the losses potentially near that much? You know, again, you're going to use these judgments. Just because the species isn't threatened doesn't mean that there's not a conservation issue associated with it. Okay, you can have significant losses and declining populations, and it still be a least concerned species. It may not feel comfortable, but that's how the criteria work. So is that getting at what you were asking?
Perfectly, yes.
Yeah, and my guess from your shaking of your head that the species, you don't have any feeling that we've lost 30% of the species.
Yeah, because roughly because we do not know the, total population, and then we also don't know like how much of it is reduced. But we know that there is considerable decline because of the as a persecution, as a pest control and climate change, and maybe other factors. My fellows tell. But can it is 30%? Is it 30%? I don't know, but we will consult with each other and think like whether it is 30% or not.
Yeah, well, and the other thing that'll confound your understanding of the species is the fact that it migrates. So
Yes.
it's there in apparent large numbers, and then it's gone, and it shows up, and so that confuses, what's going on. And with climate change, patterns are changing.
Yeah, so that is the example which I find in my study sites. There have been new roosts forming in the last 10 years, which was unreported. So it could be because it's moved from somewhere else to these new places.
Yeah, exactly. So again, with climate change, it's changing bat behaviors.
And
so there's forcing them out of one area, or maybe habitat modifications move them out of one area and into another area. And I think, if you don't know those sorts of things, those are the things that you should identify in that research needs section.
And I just want to make another point, like the upper elevation of this species, 2000 meter, right? So that is changing because the upper areas tend to have cooler climates, and then they try to move in those areas, and those areas have new roosting sites. So people think like this flying fox is increasing in number, like because of seeing the new roosting sites, but that is not the case. They are decreasing at some place, and then they are occupying these new roosting sites.
Yeah.
And one more thing is, we talk about extreme heat, right? Extreme heat is a challenge for these flying foxes, but some anecdotes says that the extreme cold is also a challenge here, because this climate fluctuation or temperature fluctuation is so, disturbed, or what can I say, due to climate change, that the temperature becomes so cold certain days that it is a challenge.
Yeah. The climate change is creating huge challenges associated with understanding what's the impacts to the bats, let alone, affecting their conservation. Huge opportunities for research, that's great, but how do we conserve them in the face of climate change? Food, phenology, fruiting, everything is going to be changing. There's a migratory species here in the US and Mexico where we have it has a relatively narrow diet as a pollinator in the arid US and into Mexico, and we know phenology is changing. So the flowering is at different times of the year relative to the migration. So if the phenology is changing, habitat restoration to provide this food source, while good, is it actually a bad thing because it's not accounting for the changing in phenology? Should we be exploring other solutions? So anyway, more and more research questions are just illuminated when you think about these things. So, and that's the important thing of bringing in fresh young minds like yourselves. My brain is old and atrophied.
No, sir. Any more questions from the participants?
Well, I think it's great that you guys have a multinational team working on this. This is wonderful. This is how it should work.
Exactly. So thank you so much for your time, and we will come back to you with the report soon. And if we do not have any other questions, then I think that is the time to leave.
All righty.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you
Dave.
so
It's been a pleasure to meeting you, and thank you all.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for
thank you.
joining.
Yes, thank you so much, Dave, and thanks Sister for organizing all of this. Yeah, it's been good to
Thank-
meet everyone.
Thanks. Bye.